Mas Oyama, the founder of Kyokushin Karate, can be called the origin of full-contact karate. This time I would like to focus on discussing the lesser-known aspects of Masutatsu Oyama, which are not widely known outside of Japan. Even if you are familiar with Masutatsu Oyama, you may not know much about his extensive network of connections, ranging from prominent martial artists who represent Japan to prime ministers and influential figures from the underworld. I hope you discover something new through this video. Kyokushin Karate, the root of nearly all direct strike karate styles, has had a significant impact not only on the karate world, but also on kickboxing, the strongest combat sport in the Netherlands, and the long history of Muay Thai. It was the source of the first foreign champion outside of Thailand in Muay Thai's history, and has greatly influenced stand-up combat sports worldwide today. The founder of Kyokushin Karate is Masutatsu Oyama, known by the name Mas Oyama. Oyama is the name he used in Japan. His real name is Choi Young-i. Oyama was born in Korea during the time of Japanese colonial rule. At the time, Koreans were considered Japanese citizens, and under the colonial government policy, those from Korea were required to use Japanese names. In this video, we will refer to him as Oyama. He stated in a TV interview that his journey into martial arts began when he learned traditional Korean martial arts, chakuriki, from Korean workers in Manchuria, where he spent his childhood. The name of this martial art is also used by the famous kickboxing gym, Chakuriki, which continues to produce globally renowned champions like Peter Aerts. A few years before Oyama moved to Manchuria, Japan began preparing for a large-scale war. On September 18, 1931, the Kanto Army, under the independent orders of staff officers Ishihara Kanji and Itagaki Seishiro, blew up the tracks of the South Manchurian Railway, a railroad operated by Japan, and falsely blamed it on the Chinese military, leading to clashes with the Chinese army. This resulted in the occupation of Manchuria by Japan. Japanese military superiors ultimately endorsed the actions of Ishihara and others. This is known as the Mukden Incident. Remember the name Ishihara Kanji, as he will show up later in this video as an important person to Oyama. In 1932, Japan established the puppet state of Manchukuo. The League of Nations condemned Japan, and Japan withdrew from the organization in 1933. Japan became isolated from the rest of the world. Tensions between Japan and China intensified, eventually leading to the Second Sino-Japanese War, marking a significant turning point in history. Around this time, Oyama is said to have returned to Korea, where he learned boxing. Boxing, which had just been introduced from the United States to Japan, became explosively popular in colonial Korea at the time. When Korean fighters faced fighters from mainland Japan, the judges' decisions would sometimes be inexplicably against them, so they adopted a more aggressive style that aimed for knockouts. In the 1938 All-Japan Amateur Championship, Korean athletes dominated all weight classes, from flyweight to welterweight. Even in professional boxing, Korean champions emerged in Japan. The unbeatable bantamweight champion, Seo Jong-gun, went to the United States and became the first Japanese fighter to be ranked in the world. It is easy to imagine that Oyama would have been drawn to the explosive popularity of boxing in Korea at the time. People who knew Oyama at the time testified that they often saw him shadowboxing, but it remains unclear from available records whether he learned boxing through self-study or was part of a gym. In 1939, a Korean intellectual named Cho Nyoung-ju, who had come from Japan to Busan in Korea, gave a lecture on the Toa Renmei, the East Asia Federation movement. During this lecture, Cho demonstrated the basic movements of the Goju-Ryu style of karate that he was studying. Oyama, who was in the audience, was deeply impressed by Cho's ideology and volunteered to go to Japan. Cho Nyoung-ju was a supporter of the East Asia Federation, which was founded by Ishihara Kanji, the mastermind behind the Mukden Incident that triggered Japan's move toward war. He also served as Ishihara's bodyguard. the East Asia Federation was founded by Ishihara Kanji, the mastermind behind the Mukden incident. Ishihara envisioned the East Asia Federation under the Japanese emperor, composed of Japan, Manchuria, China, and Korea, promoting joint national defense, economic integration, political independence, and cultural exchange. He repeatedly argued that local autonomy should be left to each region, which earned him support not only from Japanese people, but also from people under colonial rule, including Koreans. After the war, Ishihara was tried as a war criminal and was known to have had a bitter relationship with General Hideki Tojo, the 40th Prime Minister of the Empire of Japan and the head of the Dai Nippon Butoku Kai, due to differences in governance and ideology. After the Pacific War ended, Ishihara appeared as a witness at the Tokyo trials, which judged war criminals, and testified at a special court session in Sakata, Yamagata Prefecture. The Far East Tribunal had set up the session specifically to interrogate Ishihara, who was bedridden at the time. However, due to his conflict with Tojo and being demoted, Ishihara managed to avoid being prosecuted as a war criminal. It is said that it was Choo and Masutatsu Oyama who pulled the rickshaw carrying Ishihara to the special court session. Masutatsu Oyama traveled to Japan, seeking guidance from Choo. The initial purpose of his journey to Japan was to learn about the ideology of the East Asia Federation, and practicing karate seems to have been more of a secondary interest. After arriving in Japan, he studied Shotokan karate under Funakoshi Gichin, and in an unusually short period of just 1 year, he earned his black belt. At the time, people from Okinawa and Korea were looked down upon in mainland Japan due to the social climate. About 20 years prior to Oyama earning his black belt, in 1923, a great earthquake struck the Tokyo metropolitan area, causing the collapse of many buildings and resulting in nearly 105,000 deaths and missing persons. During this chaos, rumors were spread by both the government and civilians, claiming that disloyal Koreans were poisoning wells, setting fires, and other false accusations. As a result, many Koreans were indiscriminately killed over several days. This event is one of the most severe examples of discrimination against Koreans. Amidst the turmoil, people from Okinawa, with their strong regional accents, and other people from rural areas were also mistakenly killed because they were thought to be Koreans. During the time, Funakoshi was living in Tokyo. Funakoshi, who was from Okinawa, seemed to have a special regard for Oyama, possibly due to their similar experiences of discrimination. When going out, Funakoshi often preferred to take Oyama with him, as told by Konishi Yasuhiro, the founder of Shindo Shizen Ryu. One day, Funakoshi took Oyama to a shrine connected to Korea and said, "This is a place you must visit and pay your respects first." From then on, Oyama visited the shrine every year. In later years, Oyama referred to this episode in his autobiography as a memorable moment with Funakoshi. However, Oyama, who was expecting a more practical martial art, became dissatisfied with the focus on kata without sparring in his training. Soon after, he began studying Goju-ryu karate under Yamaguchi Gogen and Cho Nyoung, both of whom were followers of Ishihara Kanji's East Asia Federation ideology. Yamaguchi Gogen had taught karate at the Judo Dojo, Gihokai, which was established by Keisaburo Fukushima, a proponent of the East Asia Federation. It is not an exaggeration to say that Oyama's practical karate was mainly shaped by these two masters. In his younger years, Oyama's karate was so focused on practicality that he mostly trained with heavy emphasis on activities like sandbag work, sparring, and weight training. Even within Goju-ryu, which was known for its relatively more active incorporation of kumite, sparring at the time, Oyama's neglect of kata and spiritual training often led to remarks from his seniors that he needed to focus more on them. Despite this, his strength in kumite was said to be exceptional. Cho Nyoung and the intellectual had an outstanding martial arts background. During his time in Korea, he dedicated himself to weightlifting and boxing. After coming to Japan, he studied judo and karate. He studied Goju-ryu karate alongside Yamaguchi Gogen, the top disciple of Chojun Miyagi, the founder of Goju-ryu. Eventually, he earned a 9th-degree black belt in Goju-ryu karate and became a special advisor to the All-Japan Karate-do Goju-kai. Cho Nyoung had a close ties with Ushijima Tatsukuma, the teacher of Kimura Masahiko, who defeated Helio Gracie in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Ushijima, who also taught at the Gihokai, was like an older brother to Cho. He learned judo from Ushijima and earned a 4th-degree black belt in Kodokan Judo. Fukushima, the head of the Jihokai, had been a judo instructor at a martial arts school established by the Dai Nippon Butoku Kai, and he had also taught karate to judo practitioners like Kimura. While this section diverges a bit from Cho's story, it's worth noting that Oyama and Kimura had a brotherly relationship. Oyama often spoke about Kimura's strength during his prime, and Kimura was a hero and older brother-like figure for Oyama, much like Ushijima was for Cho. Three consecutive victories in the Meiji Jingu tournament, runner-up in the Showa Tenren Jiai. 9th dan in Kodokan Judo. Judo Kyoshi of the Dai Nippon Butoku Kai. It is said that on the day before a match, he drank the fresh blood of a soft-shell turtle and powdered pit viper. Due to his overwhelming strength and fierce temperament, he was known as Oni no Ushijima, Demon Ushijima. He entered the Iguchi Dojo of the Tsukushin Ryu School. In Kumamoto, Koryu Jujutsu, classical jujutsu, was still more popular than Kodokan Judo at the time. In the competition among the 3 major jujutsu dojos of Higo, modern-day Kumamoto Prefecture, victory was decided only by forcing an opponent to surrender with, "I give up." There were no wins by decision. Sometimes competitors would wear a short wooden sword at their waist during matches. The rule was to throw and pin the opponent, then simulate cutting their throat with the wooden sword to secure an ippon, decisive victory. These classical jujutsu styles were regarded as deadly martial arts intended for samurai on the battlefield. Before the establishment of the All Japan Championship, the Meiji Jingu tournament was effectively the national championship. He won this tournament 3 times in a row starting in 1925. 7 years after retiring as a competitor, he traveled to Beijing, where he challenged and defeated the champion of Chinese wrestling, likely Shuai Jiao, in a mixed martial arts match. Ushijima and Kimura Masahiko participated in a plan led by an army major to assassinate Tojo Hideki and overthrow his cabinet. Ishihara Kanji also strongly supported this plan. The plot involved throwing a cyanide gas bomb at Tojo while he was riding in an open car. I plan to make a video about this incident in the future, so if you're interested, please like and subscribe. On December 8, 1941, the Pacific War broke out. Like many other Koreans, Oyama worked as a forced laborer in military-related civil engineering projects at a labor camp near Tateyama, Chiba, until the end of the war. After Japan's defeat, the GHQ, General Headquarters, banned all martial arts in Japan. However, since Oyama was Korean, this ban did not apply to him, and while other martial arts were forced into a period of stagnation for several years, karate continued to progress as a martial art. It is also recorded that Cho, together with Oyama, frequented the Hanbokan, a dojo led by Yoon Hee-bong. Cho held the honorary title of master, and Oyama served as the head instructor. After the end of the Pacific War, the Koreans who remained in Japan were ultimately divided into 2 factions, those aligned with North Korea and those aligned with South Korea. However, this division was not based on their own or their parents' original place of origin, but was instead a split driven by ideology. Oyama too became caught up in this tide. On October 15, 1945, 2 months after the end of the war, the Federation of Koreans in Japan was formed under the leadership of communists, who would later align with North Korea. Many former colonial powers that had possessed colonies allowed colonial subjects who had established their livelihoods in the ruling country to choose between acquiring that country's nationality upon independence or returning to their country of origin. However, Japan implemented a unilateral policy of stripping them of their nationality. Furthermore, due to the refusal to pay wages for harsh labor, which resulted in numerous deaths at various sites, and restrictions on taking their property out of Japan, many Koreans were unable to return to their homeland. Placed in a legally unstable position under international law, approximately 90% of these individuals joined the Federation of Koreans in Japan, which was initially perceived as a mutual aid organization. At the time of its founding, the organization's platform included objectives such as ensuring the stability of the livelihoods of Koreans in Japan, facilitating and maintaining order for returning compatriots, and promoting mutual understanding and friendship with the Japanese people. It is possible that many joined in the hope that the organization would help negotiate unpaid wages and provide support for repatriation. However, the Federation of Koreans in Japan had deep ties with the Japanese Communist Party, JCP, of the time, which was known for resorting to violence to achieve its goals, though the current party has since renounced violent methods. It also received financial support from the JCP. As a result, the organization quickly became more aligned with communism, transforming into a violent group and at times acting as its vanguard. Amid the post-war turmoil in Japan, members of the organization were involved in incidents across the country, including assaults, looting, theft, unjust demands on government offices, illegal occupation of buildings, fare evasion on public transportation, and even conducting people's trials. Due to these historical events, strong resentment toward Koreans in Japan and the Japanese Communist Party remains in Japan. In recent years, international issues such as North Korea's abduction of Japanese citizens have further fueled this sentiment. Returning to the topic, those who had cooperated with the Japanese government or military during the colonial era became targets of denunciation by the Federation of Koreans in Japan. They faced confiscation of their property and at times assassination attempts. One prominent example was Park Chung-gum, who became the first Korean member of Japan's imperial diet before the war. He dedicated himself to becoming a model Japanese citizen and personally petitioned the prime minister at the time to establish a system for Korean volunteer soldiers. A list reportedly circulated with the directive: Park Chung-gum and 8 others must be assassinated. Park's residence was attacked, but he was not present and managed to escape harm. However, a portion of his assets, including real estate, was later seized under the guise of a donation. People like Choo, a supporter of the East Asia League, and Oyama were also considered traitors to their ethnicity by communist Koreans in Japan. In November of the same year, young Koreans in Japan with nationalist views formed a separate group. Nyoung, a well-known Yakuza figure in Ginza, established the Korean Youth Alliance for National Foundation Promotion. That same year, Oyama and Choo co-founded a karate research institute within the Central Youth Training Facility of the Alliance. Furthermore, in January of the following year, 1946, conservative individuals who ideologically distanced themselves from the Federation of Koreans in Japan formed the New Korean Construction Alliance. In October of the same year, this alliance merged with the Youth Alliance to establish the Korean Residents' Union in Japan, which later aligned with South Korea, making its anti-communist stance even more explicit. The two factions, communist-aligned and anti-communist, engaged in violent conflicts throughout Japan. As previously mentioned, Choo later became the leader of this organization. Incidentally, the first leader was reportedly abducted by North Korean special forces while attending a banquet in South Korea and was subsequently executed. During the pre-war and wartime periods, Koreans were also educated under Japan's militaristic system as children of the emperor, required by national policy to worship at Shinto shrines dedicated to the emperor and to adopt Japanese names. While many Koreans resisted this, some of those who grew up in that environment from an early age may not have found it unnatural. Oyama was precisely of this generation, and his patriotism toward Japan was not just for appearances. It can be inferred from his words and actions in his later years. The Korean Residents' Union in Japan, Mindan, did not solely consist of those who were anti-communist or opposed to the policies of the Federation of Koreans in Japan, Choren. It also included many Koreans whose identities as both Japanese and Korean coexisted without contradiction, such as believers in the East Asia League ideology. On February 27, 1946, the Federation of Koreans in Japan held its second Extraordinary National Congress at Nagatacho National School. The conference became chaotic over the issue of whether to support the People's Republic of Korea, a short-lived North Korean provisional government. Right-wing members of the Federation distributed leaflets demanding, "Expel the Communists from the Federation of Koreans in Japan." This sparked a violent clash between the right-wing faction led by Nyoung, Korean Youth Alliance for National Foundation Promotion, and the left-wing faction of the Federation. During the fight, right-wing member Chung Chol, a senior Mindan official, shot a left-wing youth in the abdomen. On August 15, 1948, with the establishment of the South Korean government, Mindan was officially recognized by the Korean government as the legitimate representative organization of Koreans in Japan the following month. Due to its anti-communist stance, Mindan also formed cooperative ties with Japan's right-wing factions. Prominent figures within Japan's right wing, some of whom were CIA agents, were actively involved in the anti-communist movement. In recent years, sporadic reports in newspapers have suggested U.S. involvement behind the scenes. Oyama physically fought on the front lines during clashes between organizations, taking on multiple opponents at once. However, his tendency to resort to physical force quickly made him unpopular among contemporary ethnic activists. Around this time, he was reportedly valued for his strength and made a living as a bodyguard for a Yakuza group called Toseikai. On the communist North Korean side, martial artists included Hideo Nakamura, Dai Nippon Butoku Kai Renshi Karateka, who led the Kendokai and was a senior official in the pro-North Korean Chongryon. Another notable figure was Rikidozan, known as the father of Japanese professional wrestling. On September 8, 1949, the Federation of Koreans in Japan was ordered to disband by GHQ under the Regulations on Organizations as a Violent Organization, and its assets were confiscated. However, successor organizations still exist today. In the Yakuza world of that time, Chung Jae-young was a well-known Korean figure. In 1947, he established Toseikai in Tokyo's Ginza district, using the street gang group he had founded as its base. He was influenced by Cho Naishu's Pan-Asianism ideology and created Toseikai under the principle of listening to the voice of the East as a counterforce to the Federation of Koreans in Japan, now Chongryon. Oyama also had a tense confrontation with Yang Won-seok, the leader of a violent Yakuza faction that had shaken Japan's underworld at the time. Yang Won-seok spoke about his first encounter with Oyama in an interview for Monthly Power Karate, September 1982 issue.
I first met Director Oyama during the chaotic post-war period, often called the Dosakusa era. Thinking back on our first meeting, I believe we came very close to an outright fight. However, for some reason, though I can't recall exactly what, it ended with us hitting it off completely, and from that point on, we treated each other like brothers.
As will be discussed later, this close relationship with Yang Won-seok, who had a particularly notorious reputation even within the Yakuza world, would later prove highly beneficial to Kyokushin Karate. One of the most famous episodes in Mas Oyama's life is his mountain retreat, which took place during his time at the training camp of the Korean Youth League for the Promotion of Korean Independence. Oyama's unruly behavior had raised concerns among those around him, particularly Cho Nyoung-ju, who feared that his reckless ways might ultimately cost him his life. They advised him to go into seclusion as a form of mental and spiritual training, with the additional aim of allowing things to cool down and give him a chance to lay low for a while. As will be discussed later, a manga based on Oyama's life portrayed the mountain retreat as a dramatic episode where Oyama, after having fought to protect Japanese citizens from the oppressive American forces during the post-war period, became a wanted man. This version of events presents a more heroic, romanticized version of his struggle. However, the truth seems closer to the idea that Oyama went into hiding as a result of his involvement in the intense and violent nationalist movements of the time, to escape the threats to his life. An interesting anecdote relates to a time when his friend, judo gold medalist Inokuma Isao, visited Oyama in Yokosuka in Kanagawa. During his visit, Inokuma recalls in an interview seeing Oyama preparing a firearm, which serves as an indication of the tense atmosphere surrounding Oyama at that time. Around the time of the mountain retreat, in 1947, Oyama also achieved a decisive victory in a karate competition held at a physical education tournament. The match, which involved participants wearing protective gear designed for jujutsu, saw Oyama overpowering a karate practitioner who had previously worked as a police officer in Kagoshima. Notably, the judge of this competition was Nyoung himself. In 1950, the Korean War broke out, which deeply impacted Oyama and his contemporaries. The war split their homeland into two, with the Communist North and the Democratic South fighting each other. This division played a significant role in shaping the political and ideological landscape of many figures involved in martial arts and nationalist movements at the time. Gradually, Mas Oyama distanced himself from the nationalist movements, and in 1952 he was recommended by his mentor, Ushijima Tatsukuma, to participate in professional wrestling events in the United States. Subsequently, a selection event was held where a promoter gathered various karate practitioners from Japan. Most of the participants performed kata, prearranged movements, as part of their demonstrations. However, Oyama, in a distinctive move, showcased his ability to break natural stones and boards with his bare hands. This demonstration caught the attention of the promoters, and as a result, Oyama's opportunity to travel to America was secured. In America, Oyama spent approximately 6 months performing at professional wrestling events. During his time there, he witnessed the spectacle of large, powerful men engaging in intense physical bouts, and he later shared that he was initially frightened by the sight of such formidable opponents. While there are records indicating that Oyama participated in a few wrestling matches, it is believed that he only had about 1 or 2 documented bouts during his stay. Oyama's experience in the United States exposed him to a new form of physical combat, and the unique cultural clash between the world of professional wrestling and traditional martial arts would later influence his development of the Oyama Dojo style, which is known for its emphasis on strength, endurance, and full-contact fighting. It has been revealed that one of the matches that Oyama participated in was under jiu-jitsu rules, and it seems that the result was a victory by Oyama with a submission. For Oyama, a karate practitioner, jiu-jitsu rules were clearly disadvantageous, but it is believed that Oyama was able to handle the situation due to his training in judo under Ushijima Tatsukuma at the Gihokai. In the following year, 1953, he also participated in training at the Dojo of Sonkozo, a 9th dan in Kodokan Judo. Incidentally, Oyama's final judo rank was 4th dan. After returning to Japan, a celebratory party for Oyama was attended by a number of distinguished individuals, including Ushijima Tatsukuma, Nyoung, Joe Hidemi, Oyama's senior from his Shotokan days, Sawai Kenichi, founder of Taiki Kenpo, Yamada Tasuo, founder of Nippon Kempo Karate, and Yuasa, the Majiro police station judo instructor. At this gathering, Oyama is said to have spoken about aiming for karate to become a comprehensive martial art that incorporates elements of wrestling, boxing, judo, and other disciplines. About 2 years later, in 1954, Oyama founded the predecessor to Kyokushin Karate, the Oyama Dojo. The training at that time was completely different from the current Kyokushin rules and was closer to what we now know as MMA. The martial art that involved striking the body directly without any protective gear was considered highly unorthodox in Japanese martial arts at the time, and it was even mocked as street fighting karate by practitioners of other styles. However, despite the ridicule, the dojo produced numerous high-level students, including the founders of various full-contact styles and John Blooming, the father of Dutch kickboxing. Toshio Fujiwara, who became the first foreign Muay Thai champion in history, was trained by Takeshi Kurosaki, who served as an instructor at the Oyama Dojo. The same year that the Oyama Dojo was established, the fight of the century took place on December 22, 1954. It was Rikidozan versus Kimura Masahiko. Rikidozan was a huge star with 100% national recognition at the time. He was originally from the Korean grappling martial art of Siraeum, and after coming to Japan, he became a successful sumo wrestler. After retiring from sumo, he imported professional wrestling from America and became the father of Japanese professional wrestling. Rikidozan hid the fact that he was Korean until his death and lived publicly as a Japanese. He gained immense popularity by beating up American professional wrestlers with karate chops, restoring the self-esteem of Japanese people who were devastated by their defeat in the war. The highest television audience rating for his matches was 64%. It was only after his death that the public learned that he was Korean. Ushijima Tatsukuma's top disciple, Masahiko Kimura, is widely recognized as one of the most formidable judo practitioners in history, often regarded as the strongest in judo and jiu-jitsu. He is famously known for defeating the father of Brazilian jiu-jitsu, Helio Gracie. After retiring from competitive judo, Kimura transitioned into a professional wrestler. As mentioned earlier, Kimura was like a big brother to Oyama and served as an admired hero for him. The match was supposed to end in a draw, not a serious contest, as it was a professional wrestling bout. However, something caused Rikidozan to lose his temper, and he brutally attacked Kimura. The match ended in a horrific scene where Rikidozan stomped on the back of Kimura's head while he was unconscious. Rikidozan won the match, but he violated the agreed-upon draw, and in front of the public, he tricked and attacked Kimura, someone Oyama greatly respected. This infuriated Oyama, who, despite the efforts of those around him to stop him, reportedly tried to attack Rikidozan right there and then. One theory is that, afterward, Oyama continued to target Rikidozan in his private life, but it was through the persuasion of figures like Choo, the aforementioned gangster boss Nyoung, and the company president who had helped fund Oyama's trip to America that Oyama eventually calmed down and sheathed his raised fist. Rikidozan and Kimura Masahiko later reconciled, but when Oyama heard about it, he was said to have been furious at Kimura, saying,
"Senior, are you an idiot? I'm risking my life going after Rikidozan, and what are you doing?"
With that, he said,
"I will never see you again,"
and parted ways with Kimura. The hero he had long admired was subjected to a cowardly ambush, and during a time when he was prepared to take revenge on the streets for Kimura, the reconciliation was announced to the public through the media. It seemed that Kimura, who was once again used merely to promote the appearance of Rikidozan's deep character, enraged him.
しかし木村は全面的に否定。二人の対立は試合後も続くように見えたが、過去のいきさつは水に流し、和解が成立した。
After that day, it is said that the two never met again. As Oyama mentioned in a farewell speech, it is clear that he was exploring every possible avenue in pursuit of making karate a comprehensive martial art. Starting in 1956, Oyama went on a martial arts learning spree. He learned and strengthened his techniques in Aiki Jujutsu and stick techniques from Yoshida Kotaro, master of Daito-ryu Aiki Jujutsu. Judo at the aforementioned Son Dojo. Weight training under the leading figure of Japanese bodybuilding, Wakaki Takamaru, and weightlifting with Iguchi Yukio. Boxing by sparring with Piston Horikuchi, who was also known for his training in Okinawan practical karate under the guidance of Motobu Choki. He also visited Sawai Kenichi, the founder of Taikiken, and Shioda Gozo, a master of Aikido, to observe their training, with Mike Tyson also visiting the dojo during his time in Japan. He was also actively involved in exchanges with other martial arts schools, and through Kinjo Hiroshi of the Renbukan, he became acquainted with prominent figures of Okinawan karate. He had interactions with Funakoshi Gichin, the third son of Funakoshi Gigo, and with Shukumine Seiken of Taido. In 1957, Oyama participated in the first karate demonstration tournament, hosted by Hideo Nakamura, a karateka from the pro-North Korean side, affiliated with the Chongryon, which was essentially the enemy camp in the ethnic struggles Oyama had been involved in during his younger years. He participated alongside Hiroshi Kinjo and Sadaharu Fujimoto. The following year, at the second tournament, notable karateka, who would later lead the karate world, such as Kinjo Hiroshi, Fujimoto Sadaharu, Yamaguchi Gogen, Nakayama Masatoshi, and Kanazawa Hirokazu, gathered to demonstrate their skills. Like many other dojos, the Oyama Dojo worked to balance safety and competitiveness for the sake of popularization. In 1964, Oyama established the Kyokushin Kaikan, appointing Sato Eisaku, who would become the Prime Minister of Japan later that same year, as its president, and set the rules for Kyokushin Karate. This development mirrored the evolution of Kodokan Judo, which by removing dangerous techniques from jujutsu, had evolved into a sport. During the Oyama Dojo era, training was focused on real-world street fighting, with an almost no-rules approach to practice. However, with the establishment of the Kyokushin Karate rules, restrictions were introduced, including bans on strikes to the face with hands or elbows, grabbing, throwing techniques, and joint locks. As a result, the practical nature of the training was diminished. It is particularly evident in modern Kyokushin karate competitions, which have matured as a sport, that due to the absence of hand strikes to the face, grabbing, throwing techniques, and joint locks, competitors almost always close in to zero distance. They exchange powerful punches to the chest and stomach, follow up with low kicks, and when there is space, they perform big techniques such as high kicks. This creates a technical form that raises doubts about its practicality in real combat. When Kyokushin fighters compete in kickboxing, they often struggle with responding to punches to the face, and it seems that it takes them time to adjust. As for MMA, the lack of experience with tackles, throwing techniques, and joint locks means it takes even longer for Kyokushin fighters to adapt. And in fact, it appears that Shotokan, with its traditional practice of sparring with controlled strikes, is more adaptable to MMA. This is because Shotokan practitioners who assume a lower stance and half-body posture find it easier to avoid tackles. Additionally, the straight punch in Shotokan karate, delivered with full force from a long range, something not commonly seen in other martial arts, proves to be a highly useful technique for fighters who are accustomed to boxing-style punches. It is a somewhat ironic situation that Shotokan, which has not aimed to be a practical martial art and has continued its traditional training, demonstrates greater adaptability in MMA as a comprehensive martial art. Among the senior disciples of the Oyama Dojo era, there are organizations that have been established aiming to return to the roots of the Oyama Dojo era and create their own schools. However, it is also true that by transforming from the barbaric-looking, MMA-like Oyama Dojo into the Kyokushin karate rules, which improved safety, it began to spread to the general public. In 1969, when Kyokushin Kaikan was gradually increasing its number of students, there was an attempt by the All-Japan Karate-Do Federation, Zenku-Ren, to absorb Kyokushin Kaikan. Sasagawa Ryoichi was a central figure in Japan's right-wing activist movement, an admirer of Mussolini, a former Class A war criminal, and a CIA agent. Soino was a former top disciple of Mas Oyama and the head of Shidokan Karate. Yanagawa was the boss of one of Japan's most prominent and militant Yakuza organizations at the time. He was also sworn brothers with the aforementioned Oyama, and his Korean name was Yan Won-seok. The All-Japan Karate-do Federation, Zenku-ren, was established with the aim of unifying various karate styles in Japan, such as Shotokan and Goju-ryu. At the time, its president was Sasagawa Ryoichi, the chairman of the Japan Shipbuilding Promotion Association, and a major figure in Japan's right-wing movement. Sasagawa met with Masoyama at the Akasaka Ryotei Chiyoshin and requested, "We will offer you an executive position in Zenku-ren, so please bring Kyokushin under our umbrella." Oyama flatly refused. He openly mocked Zenku-ren's point-stop rules as dance karate, leading to an intense conflict between the two sides. But his opponent was Sasagawa, a man who held sway over both the political and financial worlds. How did Oyama withstand the pressure?
Right around the time when Oyama-sensei started having conflicts with Sasagawa-san, Yanagawa-san began stepping forward as an advisor. His name even appeared in tournament pamphlets along with a photo. There was a time when, during a discussion between Oyama, Sasagawa, and Yanagawa, Yanagawa-san warned Sasagawa-san, saying, "If anything happens to Oyama, I won't stay silent." But within Kyokushin Kaiken, there were also voices of concern, questioning, why are we involving the Yakuza?
Chodoin Daikaku, known as the last fixer for his vast influence in political and financial circles, was also a martial artist holding a Goju-ryu 9th Dan.
At the time, he was one of the people who had dealings with Yanagawa. Even after Sasagawa cut ties with Oyama, there were still people within Zenku-ren who believed that Kyokushin Kaiken should be brought under its umbrella, and continued attempts to persuade Oyama. I was involved in this as well. At the time, the pressure on Oyama was immense. No matter how famous he became through manga, in the history of karate, the traditional styles held a far superior position. Kyokushin was, in some ways, overrated compared to its actual status. There was also jealousy and resentment from other styles. The one who shielded Oyama from all of this was Yanagawa-san. I believe he was the ultimate repellent for Oyama and Kyokushin Kaiken.
The establishment of standardized rules in Kyokushin Karate became a turning point, leading to an explosive increase in the number of students at its dojos. In 1971, the manga Karate Baka Ichidai began serialization, featuring Mas Oyama as its model. At the beginning of the manga, it states, "This is a true story, and this man exists in real life." It was a non-fiction work that delved into the life of Mas Oyama. Here are some of the intense episodes depicted in the manga. Mas Oyama volunteered for the Kamikaze Special Attack Unit. However, on the day before his scheduled sortie, the war ended. Left with a deep, uncontainable rage, he took it upon himself to punish American soldiers who were mistreating Japanese people. Eventually, he became a wanted man and had no choice but to retreat into the mountains to go into hiding. During his time in seclusion, Mas Oyama devoted himself entirely to karate training. After descending from the mountains, he went on to win a karate tournament. He killed a Yakuza, beat a bull to death with his bare hands, knocked out a swordsman wielding a katana, and traveled to America, where he fought and defeated boxers and wrestlers one after another. In one incident, he was surrounded by a group of armed men in America, but managed to take them all down. He continued traveling the world, engaging in fights with local martial artists and maintaining an undefeated record. Eventually, he even won a one-on-one fistfight against a gorilla.
What?
An utterly outrageous storyline. Looking back at these episodes in today's information-driven society, the manga Karate Baka Ichidai seems like nothing more than a comedy. However, at the time, young readers were completely captivated by Kyokushin Karate, believing it to be the strongest martial art in the world. After all, the manga was presented as non-fiction. As a result, the number of students at Kyokushin dojos skyrocketed. Branch dojos spread across Japan, and the movement eventually expanded worldwide. As a side note, it is believed that the story of the hugely popular fighting game Street Fighter was modeled after this manga, with characters that closely resemble those from the manga itself. Personally, I believe that the peak of Kyokushin Karate was around the time of the 5th World Tournament in 1991. During this period, Mas Oyama was still alive, and notable fighters such as Yamaki Kenji, Kurosawa Hiroki, Midori Kenji, Masuda Akira, and later successful kickboxers Andy Hug, Francisco Filho, and Sam Greco were all participating. At that time, the techniques used in the matches were not as specialized for winning the match as they are today. Each fighter seemed to bring their own distinctive style to the competition, and I remember that each match had its own unique flow. On April 26, 1994, at 8:00 a.m., Mas Oyama passed away from respiratory failure due to lung cancer at St. Luke's International Hospital in Choo Ward, Tokyo. Just days before his death, on April 19, 1994, Matsui Shokei defeated Andy Hug in the final of the 4th World Tournament, becoming the champion. In the event of his death, a will was created under the witness of 5 individuals, naming Matsui as the successor to Kyokushin Kaikan. Matsui, like Oyama, was of Korean descent and had been a close aide to Oyama in his later years. However, because the will was made without a public notary and was not known to Oyama's wife, it eventually led to a major legal dispute. On March 17, 1997, the Supreme Court ruled that the will was invalid. Though Oyama left a large fortune, the lack of proper steps to incorporate Kyokushin Kaikan as a legal entity resulted in ambiguity regarding the ownership of his assets, leading to the legal battle. Afterwards, Kyokushin Kaikan became a battleground for its top disciples, each asserting their rights, leading to a series of splits. The organization fragmented repeatedly, eventually splitting into at least 15 different factions, all claiming to represent Kyokushin Karate and holding their own tournaments. As a result, numerous Kyokushin Karate champions emerged from these various factions. Currently, the largest factions are Matsui's group and the new Kyokushin led by the 5th World Tournament champion, Midori Kenji. Both are major organizations within Kyokushin Karate, but the fragmentation of the movement shows no sign of stopping. Nevertheless, Kyokushin is one of the largest karate organizations in the world. As previously mentioned, the explosion in the number of students at Kyokushin Kaikan was triggered by the manga Karate Baka Ichidai. However, while the manga claimed to be non-fiction, most of its episodes were not based on fact. To give an extreme example, the previously mentioned story of Oyama's time in seclusion is one such case. The manga portrayed Oyama as suppressing American soldiers causing trouble in Japan with violence, ultimately becoming a wanted man and going into hiding in the mountains. However, considering the timeline and circumstances, the most plausible explanation seems to be that Oyama was involved in Korean ethnic movements, which posed a direct threat to his life, leading him to go into hiding for safety. There is also no record of Oyama ever volunteering for the Kamikaze Special Attack Unit, as suggested in the manga. Additionally, the manga depicts Mas Oyama achieving victory after victory against wrestlers and boxers in America using karate techniques. However, as previously mentioned, the actual records show only 1 or 2 such matches, and one of them was a jiu-jitsu match. While there are some hearsay accounts from people who claim to have witnessed these events, such information is extremely unreliable. The story of Oyama knocking out a gorilla is far beyond exaggeration. It's so outlandish that one might even develop a sense of admiration for the author's imagination. Although the manga's author was not Mas Oyama himself, the way the story was constructed and how Oyama portrayed himself within it is evident in his own writings. This suggests that Oyama was not entirely a passive victim. In a way, he was complicit in the creation of his own myth. After Oyama's death, some former readers began to seriously question the credibility of the manga, realizing that most of the episodes were not based on actual events. In this context, it was also discovered that Oyama was of Korean descent. Many of those who had once seen him as a hero in their youth were disillusioned to learn that he had been portrayed as Japanese, and they became anti-fans, continuing to spread slander on social media to this day. Some of the former disciples and associates who had parted ways with Oyama also joined this movement after his death, taking advantage of the growing awareness that the manga's credibility was questionable. They persistently attacked Oyama's life, which had been filled with embellishments, and also targeted Matsui and other high-ranking disciples of Korean descent, tying their ethnicity into the criticisms. These individuals were able to gather support and accumulate views by fueling this narrative on social media platforms. However, despite the ongoing personal criticisms from certain associates, no one who truly knew Mas Oyama during his prime has ever criticized his strength. This suggests that even after the myth surrounding the manga has been shattered, Oyama's actual karate prowess remains unchallenged and continues to be proven by his real achievements. To close, I will introduce the most insightful episode that best reflects the real Mas Oyama. Ultimately, it was Kimura Masahiko who parted ways with Oyama. However, in the book Why Didn't Masahiko Kimura Kill Rikidozan?, based on meticulous research by writer Masutatsu, there are eyewitness accounts of Oyama's no-rules fights. These accounts offer further insight into Oyama's real combat abilities. Before Kimura Masahiko fully transitioned into a professional wrestler, around 1951 to 1953, Oyama toured the provinces with him. During this time, Kimura and Endo Kokichi participated in professional judo and professional wrestling matches. After the matches, they would invite audience members to challenge them by asking, "Is there anyone who wants to challenge us?" Oyama would be the one to face the challengers. During a local event, a former sumo wrestler challenged Oyama. Oyama easily defeated him. Next, a well-known judo practitioner from the All Japan level stepped up to challenge him. Oyama also defeated him effortlessly. At this point, Oyama said, "Two at once is fine." Kimura Masahiko, aware of Oyama's strength, warned the audience.
"It's getting dangerous, you should stop."
However, since Oyama was not widely known at the time, both the sumo wrestler and the judo practitioner insisted on continuing, saying,
Let us try.
As the judo practitioner came from behind and the sumo wrestler advanced from the front, Oyama first delivered a back kick to take down the judo practitioner, and then a front kick to knock out the sumo wrestler, each with a single strike. The speed of his techniques was so astonishing that the audience was left in awe. Both challengers were immediately sent to the hospital, the sumo wrestler with 2 broken ribs. The author notes that Kimura Masahiko was extremely strict about the strength of martial artists, only acknowledging those he genuinely believed were truly strong. Since Kimura said this, the author concludes that the story is undoubtedly true. Additionally, the author mentions that Oyama's victory in a fight against the university judo champion at the time is also confirmed through interviews with surrounding judo practitioners and karatekas, further supporting the claim. Personally, I feel that these testimonies, coming from practitioners outside the karate world, specifically from judo and jujitsu, which were not bound by the hierarchical constraints of the karate community, ensure greater objectivity in the account. I've forgotten what book it was, but I remember reading this story about Oyama. Oyama saw Kimura only once after they parted. One spring day, Kimura was walking slowly in the soft afternoon sunlight up the slope that runs. Oyama was driving on some business and slowed down to watch Kimura as he slowly drove along the side of the road without calling out to him. The glorious days of Kimura's past came back to him like a slideshow in his mind. Oyama was surprised at how much Kimura had aged, but says he could never forget that his broad shoulders, which remained the same as before, looked somehow lonely. Oyama died about a year after Kimura's death. Thank you for watching this video until the end. We also randomly release videos focusing on lesser-known information about Japanese martial arts, so if you're interested, please do subscribe. If you liked the video, giving it a thumbs up and subscribing would be a great encouragement. If you have any episodes or stories related to karate or Kyokushin that you know of, please feel free to share them in the comments section. Details, additions, and corrections to the information in the video will be posted on the blog. Please check there for more in-depth information. Japan B shares information about Japan that is not widely known.